This is the 21.5 Show.
You're on 121.5, the emergency frequency.
Whether you're a professional pilot or want to be one, you're in the right place.
Let's get started.
Join professional aviators Dylan and Max as they talk their experience in the airlines, business aviation, and more.
Life is good.
Industry experts, unique stories, and plenty of fun. This is the 21.5 Show.
Here we go.
Another episode of the 21.5 Show Summer Mobile to Go version. Max, should we call it that?
Very short on time right now. We got a holiday weekend upon us. You got kids' last day of school, graduation ceremonies to attend. So, and I have a Nashville turn in here too. So,
but we have to give the people what they want. We have to give the people.
we got to do it.
That's right. We got Max on the car phone. He's on his way in to fly a plane load of what I would assume are bachelorette parties to Nashville right now. Having recently been in Nashville.
Yeah, at least 1 to 5.
Oh my
be bored.
goodness. That's a whole nother story. But we got to record this intro. We had to introduce our guest, Dr. Chris Broyhill. Of course, as many of you listeners will remember if you've been around for a while, he is the creator of the AirComp Calculator. He's the authority in business aviation compensation, and he's who we both use to source comp data for when we're trying to figure out comp plans for small flight departments. Max, another great conversation with Dr. Broyhill. The guy is just a wealth of knowledge.
He really is. The nice thing about Dr. Broyhill is he can speak on multiple levels. He's like a chameleon of pilot compensation, where he can talk to the Fortune 500 company HR vice president of HR. He can talk to the CEO. He can talk to the one airplane owner and talk to the pilots and get the same point across using different vernacular for each group. So I think it's really great what he does. Very powerful service for guys like us and others.
Absolutely. Of course, if you haven't checked out the AirComp Calculator, you can go on the website, clicking, set all the parameters so you can actually dial in the data. I showed this report to somebody the other day, and they're like, well, that's the national data, and they're like, no, actually, we dialed this right down into Phoenix, so you can specify the airframe size. So, I mean, you can really get pretty granular with his information. But enough of us talking about it. Let's just dive right into our conversation with Chris. Max, we're so pleased to be rejoined by our pilot salary diamond dog, Dr. Chris Broyhill from the AirComp Calculator. Listeners will remember he's been on the show several times to share pilot salary information with us, and we're excited to have you back again. Dr. Broyhill, welcome.
Yeah, welcome back.
Thank you. It's great to be here as always.
Nothing pilots like to talk about more than getting paid. So,
that is true. That is true.
So, Dr. Broyhill, when we talked to you last, things were in full force. Every airline was hiring. Salaries were still kind of going up on the business aviation side. There was lots of demand. Now, 2024 here, when we're recording the beginning of March, we're starting to see some airlines slow down hiring. Some have stopped altogether. So we thought it'd be a good time to check in with you and kind of get a feel of the marketplace. What are you seeing out there with this new market?
Well, it's an interesting time. I think, for the last couple of years, particularly in the wake of COVID, with the hiring frenzy that's been going on and the compensation increases that have been occurring, people keep asking, how much is enough? When is it going to stop? And there are several people who are opining that we're hitting the crest of the wave, if you will, and it's going to get ready to go back down, down the backside. I'm not sure I agree with that. Yeah, you're right. Some airlines have, slowed their hiring down. Southwest, I think, is taking no new hires, but they're dealing with people that are on, the list that they have, and I think Delta's in the same place. The others are still hiring. The cargo carriers are slowing down. But, the OEMs are still producing airplanes. I think Gulfstream expects to have a record year this year with G700 deliveries. even with the delays in certification. There are a lot of people that are waiting for that airplane. And I've done comp studies, comp work for people who are waiting for that airplane, and there's a lot of them out there. So somebody is going to need to be available to fly these airplanes. And I think between some of the airlines are continuing to ramp up a tad. I know that United has got an order for 800 airplanes. Yes, some of those are fleet replacement, but some of those are also fleet expansion. The bottom line is, as much as a lot of people would like to hope that the pilot, should we call it, is it a shortage as much as it's just a demand issue? I don't know how you would, what the appropriate phraseology is. In the line of work I do, from an economy perspective, if prices are going up for something, it's in demand. The demand is higher than the supply, and that's Econ 101. And right now we're still seeing that. We're still seeing the demand exceed the supply, particularly for the nicer, flight department jobs where people are flying nicer airplanes, working for bigger companies, and that sort of thing. So I don't think that's going to stop anytime soon with the deliveries of new airplanes and just the demand. Plus, the older crowd, people in my generation, are going to be phasing out, soon. And there's a lot of old guys in business aviation. You see them every day, and they're going to be hitting the street. I think who just instituted the retirement program? Was it NetJets? NetJets instituted a 70-year-old retirement program. So there are a lot of people out there, a lot of guys out there that are planning on flying into their 70s. I know that there are flight department directors, people I worked for, that are working into their 70s. And I don't know about you, but when I hit the big 70, I'd like to not be working anymore. So my point is, I don't think that what we're seeing is going to go away in any real form anytime soon. Now, I recently had a rant I published on my LinkedIn feed about, I called it loyalty unions and the tyranny of the two pilot, one aircraft operation. Because you've all heard it, you've got one jet, you got two pilots. Oh, we don't fly very much, but you don't have a life. You're always on demand, and depends on when the owners want to go where. So when you try to plan something, that might be one of the days that you're scheduled to fly. Then if you ask for time off, they get ticked. Or if you want to schedule contractors or whatever, oh no, you guys have to be available. That's what we're paying you for. Blah 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 blah. I.e., my time's more important than yours. You have no life, and just suck it up. So my point with that is, I think we're still at a place where people can walk away from those kinds of jobs and find better ones, where they can have a life, and maybe they might take a lateral move in pay, but the pay's still going to be pretty good. I think what the current climate is such that people are going to be able to still be discerning in what kind of positions they will accept and what conditions they're willing to accept. In that feed, I said, I made recommendations regardless of what side of the transaction you're on, whether you're hiring or whether you're the person being hired. And I said that, more and more, the first question that pilots ask when they're considering a new job, when they're talking to the hiring manager, is what kind of schedule does this airplane have? And if they're told there's no schedule, they sayonara, see ya, and they're not interested. And so the ability for pilots to be, it used to be, back in, not too long ago, if somebody was offering a pilot job, you took it because you didn't know if there was going to be any other prospects. And now there are still lots of other prospects, and people can afford to be choosy. So to answer your question in yet another verbose way, I don't think what we're seeing is going to change anytime really soon. I think the earliest we'll start to see a break is next year at some point. But I think with the demand that operators are going to have for qualified personnel and the good jobs that are out there, I think it's still going to be a pilot's market for a while longer.
So, Dr. Broyhill, I have a question for you. So I think in the past, when you were evaluating a business aviation job, it was very, very focused on the money because the benefits weren't really there, and you kind of just had to get as much as you can in the terms of compensation to offset. They're just not. Maybe you have health insurance and a 401k match of some sort, but nothing close to what the airlines traditionally had. And now with new airline contracts, basically the dust has kind of settled on all that, and made big gains on that end. And now with the pilot shortage combined, do you see a lot more benefits, as far as loss of license, potentially disability, like all the stuff that kind of the airlines have? Have you seen a lot of that come into play with evaluating a business aviation job aside from just the salary now?
Yeah, I have. And I think people are becoming more benefits focused. And to talk about, just compensation in general, there are, basically 4 different levels of compensation that I deal with. One is base salary. That's the number that everybody focuses on. The second is total cash compensation, which is base salary plus bonus. What I will tell you, and I'll talk more about how that can change in a second, what I increasingly hear is that, pilots are getting paid so much inside the corporate pay structures of certain companies that they end up topping out against the top of a pay band. And base salary structures, and I'm working on my certified comp professional credential, base salary structures are really difficult to change inside a company. However, where compensation professionals do have a lot of wiggle room to be creative is in variable pay. Variable pay are things like bonuses and like long-term incentive payments and that sort of thing. So I think very often in our industry, people get really focused on what's the base salary number? What am I going to be taking home every month, to pay the rent or the mortgage or feed the kids or what have you? I would say that you need to open your mind, if you're not there already, to the bonus, the yearly bonus. The company can be very, very creative there with the yearly bonuses, and they can make your cash number much better if they pay you a yearly bonus. And then the third form of compensation is total direct compensation. Total direct compensation is base plus bonus, and then any kind of long-term incentive payments. They can include stock options, they can include restricted stock units, some form of equity in the company. They can be long-term cash and that sort of thing. A lot of companies are starting to use that as a retention tool. On the average, 20 to 30% of main corporations will pay long-term incentive payments, equity payments, to people at the pilot level, which is typically not heard of. Usually that's an executive sort of thing. That's like a chief pilot or a director of maintenance or a director of aviation sort of thing. Now they're paying them at the pilot level because they know that's what's necessary to keep, and because they know that if a pilot's thinking about making a transition and they're going to be leaving cash on the table, that's an effective retention mechanism to perhaps get them not to leave. And then the final part, Max, to your point, is where all the benefits lies. Total compensation. What do the benefits include? What do my health benefits look like? What do my dental benefits look like? What do my long-term disability benefits look like? Do I get loss of license insurance? And one of the things I think is a credit to our industry is the men and women who are looking at pilot jobs now, instead of being so base salary focused, they're now looking at the bigger picture. They're looking at what are the variable pay options? Will I get a long-term incentive payment? And what kind of health insurance? How much out of pocket? There are companies that can do things in the total compensation space where, for example, they can set it up so you have no co-pays for your health insurance, or you don't pay health insurance premiums. That's just the company does all that. That costs them a little bit more, and while that cash number you have, may not be much larger than your guy down the street, you're out of pocket over the course of a year for going to the doctor with you and your kids and your wife or husband could be substantially less. And that's real money at the end of when you're talking household budget. That's real money. The long-term incentive, or the loss of license insurance piece is a big deal, and I think more and more companies are looking at it as a mechanism to retain their pilots, kind of like what the airlines do. So for those of you who are listening, what's the difference between loss of license insurance and long-term or short-term disability insurance? So loss of license insurance is in fact a form of disability insurance, but it's very specialized because you can be totally physically able to do any number of jobs, but because something happened to you, you can't fly an airplane anymore because you lost your medical qualification, whether it's a heart thing that's controlled by meds or whether it's a vision thing or what have you. So it's a very, very, very specialized form of disability insurance, but it doesn't last forever. It usually lasts for some period of time. It may last until you're 65, or it may last until, for a finite period of time. So I think when people are looking at that and trying to price it and understand what it is, they need to do their research and figure out what options are available and what options, that they're interested in, and not just say, I want loss of license insurance, and that's it. They need to understand what they're talking about. Anyway, I hope that, again,
no. I just feel like, that's been a transition over the last few years in business aviation, where people are a lot more sensitive to that because, basically what we always see, and I was in the same position. I'm trying to talk myself into staying in business aviation, and sometimes, depending on where you're at and what your structure is, compensation and otherwise, it's hard to not convince yourself that you should go to the airlines because of the whole package. It's not just the money. And so I think that a lot of flight departments have done a good job now of trying to even that disparity. And while, it's very hard to match, what the airlines have, and especially where they have now, we have a 20 at Southwest now, where in a couple of years, it ramps up to 20% NEC contribution to your 401k, to your retirement. And that's crazy. That's very hard to compete with. But if you close the gap enough, I think that it makes a good case for people to stay, that don't want to go, that don't want to be an airline pilot, but are trying to talk themselves, that that's something they have to do. So one of the things that I coach people on that are in the management roles is that they need to give their people, for those, you've got the business aviation is kind of like our political landscape. There's three camps. In the political landscape, you've got the people on the hardcore conservative side. Let's call those business aviation aficionados. They're not going anywhere. Then you've got the people on the far left side. Those are the people that are toying with the idea of the airlines. There's something pulling them. They're thinking about it. And then you've got all the undecided voters in the middle. So I think the way I coach people is I say, give your folks the ability to not sound stupid at the dinner table for staying in business aviation. Because if you compare the numbers, I do this all the time for flight departments. I map out where their compensation levels are versus like the major airlines. I map out a notional career in the airlines. This is what it's looked like. You have to make a lot of assumptions, obviously, but I map out a notional career in the airlines. And I tell you, this is where your corporate compensation level intersects the airline curve. Here's how long it's going to take you to make back your current compensation level by joining the airlines. And then here's how long it's going to take you to make back all the money you lost in that transition. And it's about increasing uncertainty. It's paying your people enough so that if they're examining the airlines, it's not a no-brainer. And right now, I'll tell you that if the number people are getting paid doesn't have a 2 in front of it, it's a no-brainer, airlines-wise. Financially, it's a no-brainer. It's just that simple. It's a no-brainer. If the number even has a 2 in front of it, you can, depending on where you are in life, like let's say you don't have kids that are coming up on college anytime soon and you can afford to take the pay cut for 3 to 5 years, then it's still pretty enticing. If the number you're getting paid has a 3 in front of it, odds are, and you're not, I guess it really doesn't matter, but if the number you're getting paid doesn't have a 3 in front of it, has a 3 in front of it, going to the airlines, it's going to take you a while to get back, and you may not ever get back. And of course, this does not take into consideration the fact that you could be promoted within your own organization. Maybe you go from captain to senior captain. Maybe you get picked to be the chief pilot or the director or something like that. Obviously, those are different pay scales, so it doesn't make those assumptions. But my point being is when your people sit down with their spouse at the dinner table and they pull out the legal pad and they're starting to map out, here's what the years of my earning life are, and here's how much I can make going to the airlines, here's how much I'm making now. If you map it out and they don't seem stupid for staying in business aviation or financially irresponsible, and I hear that a lot, am I being financially responsible? So we just have to pay them enough so that they don't seem financially irresponsible. And the other thing is, I think what a lot of people don't take into consideration
is that if you're a business aviation person and you've come up in business aviation and you've gotten used to the lifestyle and the environment of the places where you've been working, going to the airlines is not just a job change, it's a lifestyle change. It's a culture change. It's a mentality. And I've heard many stories of people that go to the airlines just can't deal with the unionization of it and the whining and everything else. And within a few months' time, they come back because they just don't want to put up with that nonsense.
The best anecdote I've gotten is from one of our friends, Max, who went to the airlines, and he's like, I never realized how much pooping in public I was going to have to do at the airlines because I'm in the terminal all the time. And he's like, and it was just one of those things you would never think about, you know, when you're the salary, 401k match, and all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, but you got to use a public bathroom 4 times a week now, you know, or whatever. So it's just kind of funny, like one little thing. But you're right, Dr. Broyhill. I mean, there is a certain lifestyle that you get used to. And, you know, and at the end of the day, we've said, you know, money is one asset, time is another. Some people value one more than the other. And,
right.
So there are definitely trade-offs there. And public restroom use is the third leg of the stool, I think, right now, right? So it's time, money, and
no
and
pun
bathroom
intended.
access. Right, exactly. So I got a couple questions for you on the business aviation side. You know, when last year, about a year ago right now, we were seeing intense demand for typed and current pilots because the training centers were so backed up. You could not get someone into an initial for a really long time. And so there was poaching going on, right? Because, you're current in the 7X. Whoop, it doesn't matter. If the 7X is sitting and not flying, then it doesn't do anybody any good. So, yeah, we'll pay you whatever to come fly it. The training centers have all changed their policies now. It's much easier to get that initial training slot we've seen. There's still a backlog on certain airframes, certainly, but it's definitely a lot less than it was. Have you seen poaching change at all? Have you seen that part of the market change at all?
I will tell you that the people there's this, when I do compensation presentations and do compensation work, there's this slide that I show about the shortage within the shortage, and the shortage within the shortage are for the people, the guys and gals flying the newest, sexiest stuff, and that's the G500, 600, soon to be the 700, which will be I think it's a different type. I think it's a type with differences or something like that. I know that you can. It's kind of a short course. Like, for example, if you've flown the Falcon, an easy cockpit, and you've flown the Falcon 2000, you can get a short course to get the Falcon 2000 easy. So, and I don't know if and I'll probably have that verbiage incorrect, but what my point being is to go from if you're typed in you've got a G7 type rating, you're typed in the 500, 600, to fly the G700, you don't have to do a whole initial, you can do a short course. But I will tell you that the people I do work for that are flying these kinds of airplanes, whether it's a G500, 600, soon to be 700, or a Global 7000, 7500, soon to be the Falcon 10X when it comes out, they are wary enough of people wanting to poach those folks because that's where the training centers haven't caught up. Because the demand for those type ratings and the cost for them, unless you've got entitlement training that you're getting with the purchase of an airplane, if I wanted to go get typed if I had the money to pay for myself an extra 150K lying around, which I don't, and I wanted to go get typed in a G600, and I'm just Joe Schmo off the street, it's going to be a year and a half before I get in for that initial because everybody else is going to get priority. So to answer your question, has poaching stopped for most of the other types? Yes, I've not heard about it as much, but I will tell you the people flying the newer, sexier stuff are still very wary of it and willing to pay, enough to keep people from wanting to leave, which is a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, and you mentioned now, I mean, are you seeing G500 or G7 type rating people? I mean, is that number's almost got to start with a 3 at this point, right? For most pilots. That's
pretty much. If you're not paying somebody, and even G650s as well. If you're not paying, and I'm talking captains now. I'm not talking leadership positions, captains, senior captains. If you're not paying somebody something that starts with a 3 in front of it, you're going to lose them because somebody will. Somebody will. There's an operation I did some work for, a locally based operation, where they had 2 of their pilots poached. They're flying G650s. They had 2 of their pilots poached by management company accounts, and it was a 320 base. 320 base. So now again, you're flying for a management company versus, this operation or whatever. So what's the quality of life going to look like? Who knows? But if it doesn't have a 3 in front of it, you are accepting risk. So.
Yeah. And that's, like you said, you paid 70, 80 million bucks for the plane. Mm-hmm. It's not going to do any good sitting there if it's
well,
empty.
and I need to qualify that 3 in front of it, to our earlier conversation, that 3 in front of it doesn't necessarily, in this case, it was base salary that the management company account offered, but it can be a combination of base, bonus, long-term incentive, benefits. It can be a combination of things to get them there. But again, it's about not making them feel stupid for sticking around.
Let's take a time out from our conversation to talk about another friend of ours, Timothy P. Pope, who's a certified financial planner dedicated to guiding professional pilots through smart financial planning. Whether it's saving for retirement, investment management, a seamless military transition, or strategic tax planning, Tim is your trusted financial partner. Join Tim as he leads engaging discussions on personal finance strategies for professional pilots on the Pilot Money podcast. Timothy P. Pope, helping professional pilots make the most out of life. Okay, so shifting gears a little bit, Dr. Broyhill, when you kind of look over the past, I think your metrics, maybe you track by the quarter, kind of the percentage increase in every category. Are you still seeing a pretty solid trend moving up and to the right, or what have you seen trend-wise over the last 6 months?
Oh, it's still going to be up and to the right for a while longer. It's definitely going to be up and to the right. That's the way the aging process works with numbers. We're living in an inflationary time period. Cost of labor is a lagging indicator. Cost of living is a leading indicator. So as the cost of living goes up, the cost of labor is going to have to go up to stay with it to an extent. So as long as we have an inflationary economy and the continued demand that we're seeing, we're going to see that it's going to still move up and to the right. Economically, there's just no way to avoid it. So. And would you compare like Q4 of 2023 to Q1 of 2020? I mean, are you seeing any difference in that change, or is it pretty constant? So it's relatively constant. For Q1, I aged the data that I use in the AirComp Calculator by quarter. So when the BLS number, the Bureau of Labor Statistics number that I follow very closely, is the rise in private industry compensation, over the course of the quarter, and that's all. It's everybody that's not doesn't work for the government, and that number. So that rise overall was 1% for Q2, it was 1% for Q3, and Q4 was 0.9%. So that labor curve is maybe waning just a tad. But again, that's everybody. That's all industry, and it's not just us. It's everybody. But it's a good metric to kind of keep in mind in terms of where the economy is going, and where the economy goes, so go we. So I mean, it's just a question of how long it takes us to get there.
Dr. Broy, I have a question for you. Yeah, I have a question about how, I think a lot of people tie business aviation compensation and things directly to what's going on at the airlines and think that has an effect downstream, which I'm sure it does, right? Whether or not airlines are hiring, not hiring, what their contracts are doing. Can you just talk a little bit about how close that correlation is and what kind of delay you see between what happens with the largest hires of pilots, the big airlines, versus what happens in business aviation, how close those are kind of tied?
So in the past, prior to about 2015, I don't think anybody was paying attention. From 2015 to 2018, or pre-COVID, people started to really pay attention, and they were paying attention a lot. I think we are at a place now where, unless something radically changes, like the airlines, let's say, God forbid, another 9/11 type event happens and the airlines just stop hiring. As long as the airlines continue doing what they're doing and people keep wanting to travel and the demand for that travel and the demand for pilots continues, I don't think the airline compensation thing is ever going to be out of anybody's cross-check again. I think it's always going to be part of the cross-check. I think people are going to be paying attention. So what's the correlation? I think it obviously when, we can talk about the demand lessening or whatever. But Southwest's new contract and Delta's new contract, America's new contract and United's new contract, it's crazy. So that is definitely something to consider. Now, I tell people all the time, in business aviation, you can't pay what the airlines pay. Don't try. To circle back to what I said a few moments ago, I said just pay enough to not make your people seem stupid, or pay enough to create uncertainty in the transition and make them think twice about it. But that's always going to be a factor. It's always going to be an issue, and it's always going to be something people have to consider. If you're a hiring manager, if you're a pilot, if you're an HR compensation person, it's just something you're going to have to be aware of. It's a reality, and it's not going away.
Yeah, I think the big difference was it all of a sudden became the biggest threat to losing your pilot, where it wasn't quite like that, like you're saying, in 2015, for example, where now it's like everybody who left, or not everybody, but the majority of people that left were going to the airlines because it was such a good deal and there were so many jobs available, whereas so it wasn't necessarily like, we're trying to match that. It just became the biggest threat to losing your employees. So you had to consider it, right?
Yeah, and so when I did my 2017 research into why people were leaving business aviation, particularly pilots, what I discovered was there was a series of questions I asked concerning what would make you stay around, why would you leave, perception. They're all perception-based questions with a standard, scale where it's like disagree, strongly disagree, blah, 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 blah. What I discovered during that research was that the people who were business aviation people and the people who are airline prone people, the mean responses to the answers to those questions were statistically significantly different. What that means is they're two different groups. They think differently. And what does that mean in the context of this discussion? If there's people out there that are seriously toying with the idea of the airlines, they are thinking differently about everything. And how far they are into the airline side, how far they are into the undecided camp, who knows? But they are thinking differently. And it's kind of a battle, in addition to being a battle for the hearts, for the pocketbook, it's a battle for the hearts and minds of those people. You've got to create culturally a place where they want to stay. And I think that's something that's in the control of every business aviation manager. And so as far as that correlation, that what you were talking about, Max, about people just, really looking at it hard, I think in addition to the pay piece, the quality of life piece is huge. Now, we talk about, the airlines, you can schedule your life. Yes, you can. But when you're a newbie, you're going to spend some time on reserve. And that's, when you're on reserve, can you select the days you're on reserve? Yeah, you can. But when you're on reserve, are you in control of your life? Nope. You can be called up to commute somewhere and jump on an airplane in a heartbeat. So that getting to a place in the airlines where you actually have no kidding control of your life and you can pick the days and you can hold a line, that's going to take some time to get there as well. So it's not this instant transition where you walk out the door and poof, I'm getting paid more, and poof, I can control my life. No, it's going to take some time to reach both of those mileposts.
And that time is taking longer now with the change in hiring.
Yeah.
That's a very elastic thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's well said. What Dr. Broyhill, do you track any metrics with contract flying or using additional pilots? Are you seeing flight departments create a budget to help improve quality of life? Do you look at any of that?
I only hear of it rarely. It's not something I track, but I will tell you that the people who do that are are very upfront about this is something we do for our people. We maintain a contract pilot budget so we can guarantee our people a quality of life. I will tell you that you see two things. You see people adequately staffed to provide their people a quality of life, or adequately funded, to provide their people quality of life, or the people that just either can't, don't, or don't care. And I've seen, the gamut of both. When I give compensation advice, typically I advise people to pay like in the 75th percentile to stay ahead of the market. I did some work for one guy that they had it was an on-call schedule, but the on-call schedule guaranteed that people got a hard 10 days off per month. So they could count 10 days off. And he said, do you think we need to can we monetize quality of life in this position? Can I target the 60th percentile rather than the 75th, given that these guys and gals are going to have a better guaranteed quality of life? I said, yeah, you can. I said, I think that's a good argument because they know what they're getting. And if they decide to jump ship for more money, are they going to get 10 hard, not only 10 hard days off a month, but 10 hard days off a month they can predict for the entire year. I mean, that's huge. And hard days off a month they can trade with their friends if they want. Yeah, I'll take your 10, you take my 10. That's huge. If you've got that kind of versatility and that kind of guaranteed quality of life, can you monetize that? Yeah, you can. So, while I don't have a way to track that, quantitatively, Dylan. It's something I pay attention to when I see it, and the truth is I don't see it as often as I'd like to see it.
It's funny when you kind of mentioned the salary level and when you're quantifying that value of schedule. There's an airplane here in the valley that's looking for a pilot, and the salary is very high for the airplane. It would probably say it's the highest paying job. The downside is the schedule is extremely flexible and constantly changing.
Yeah.
And it's a great lesson for folks out there. Like, there's a reason why they're paying that money, mm-hmm. and they're exchanging that time for money. So it's a good reminder sometimes to see.
One of my best friends was flying a G600 for a very wealthy guy, and he was being paid well into the threes to do it. But he could not. He asked the guy, "I just want to be able to schedule one weekend a month off so I can be a dad." And the guy said, "Sorry, can't do it." And he left. He walked out, gave his notice, and left, making 300 plus. So money does not always solve the problem. And to your point, if they're paying a lot of money, you have to wonder sometimes, what are they paying that much money for?
Exactly. Dr. Broyhill, let's talk a little bit about the AirComp Calculator. For anyone who is not familiar with what it is, can you kind of give a little summary of what it is and how pilots and department managers and even aircraft principals can use it?
Sure. So it's an online engine that uses data from multiple surveys and data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics to generate scientifically valid compensation ranges for 14 different positions that you find in most flight departments. And the compensation ranges are generated at the 10th, 25th, 50th, 75th, and 90th percentiles. And it is a I'd use a four-letter word that starts with S, but it's a it's a no crap way of making sure you've got the right numbers. How about that? That's politically correct, right?
That was a struggle, huh?
Yeah.
It's the funny thing is that's exactly what I was thinking in my head because, Dr. Broyhill was provided those the AirComp calculator to me when we got a different airplane, and I use that, and it's great. It's the greatest thing ever when you're a pilot because one, you don't have to come in thinking because the thing is everybody's always skeptical that you're twisting the numbers to your best benefit, right? You just say, look, this is the deal. You slide it across and be like, this is the best. What I said, my exact words, I think, I'm like, this is the best source of quality data on this subject. Here you go. This is the best information I have, and this is the best you're going to get. Here's the guy's phone number that generates it if you want to talk to him.
Yeah. And I'm always happy to talk to people too when they call about it. What I will tell you is it's hard to argue with. The methodology is hard to argue with. And right
at the end of the day, that's it. You really cannot argue with it because it uses multiple streams of data, and it's all backed up. And at the end of the day, it's backed up by the dude that generated it. Like that's what I said. I said, here you go. You call him, have HR call him, whoever you want. He will walk you through exactly where this comes from, and that way you don't. It's just
HR.
It just makes everyone's life.
HR people are so when I do the deep dive studies, HR people are increasingly calling me now. So I'm doing work now directly for HR people in companies because they've thrown their hands up in the air and said, we just can't keep up with this stuff. But to your point, Max, I mean, if you're a pilot, the cost versus the potential benefit, the cost of a single report versus the benefit to your career, it's like a no-brainer. And you should be looking on a yearly basis. You should be checking in. Saying, here's what the market is, here's where I am. And not just pilots, but, maintenance personnel, schedulers, flight attendants, the leadership positions, chief pilots, director of aviation. I've got all that data and check in once a year and say, here's what I'm being paid, here's what they're telling me. And I don't have a dog in the fight. The data's the data. And where you are versus the data, that's on your side of the equation. I just generate the data.
That's it. And I think at the end of the day, the people that are writing the checks, they just need something to substantiate that number.
Mm-hmm.
It's not not that I took his word for it or whatever it is, but it's just I think it puts everyone at ease to be able to fall back and be like, look, this is what the data indicates. It's very difficult to argue with. So thanks for doing that. It makes,
not opinion.
As somebody that actually used it, it's very helpful for everybody involved.
Good. Cool.
Yes.
Very good.
Okay, Dr. Broyhill, this is the real reason we had you on the show here. A couple of weeks ago, Max and I debated the G280 versus the Challenger 350-3500. So now we need you to weigh in. We talked about range and cabin and avionics and all this, but is there a substantial difference in compensation between those two direct competitors? Do the numbers skew much?
They're both super midsize. So they're in the same pay class. So they're in the same pay class.
But would you say, Dr. Broyhill, in your professional opinion, that normally the cooler pilot would fly the G280? Just on a personality level.
Well, I am more prone to Gulfstreams than I am to Challengers, so I'll just leave it there.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll just leave it there. Thank you.
We're deleting this. Unbelievable. Interesting. So they're in the same class. Now, those particular airplanes, and maybe you could throw in like the Legacy or the Praetor or something like that, they're in this weird like sort of band.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Right?
What straddles the gap? What airplanes are like have one foot on either side of it?
That's a weird.
Well, it kind of depends on how you define it. So like, the surveys try to group them, like for the NBAA survey groups everything together by weight class. So everything, I think it's like 20,000 to 45,000 pounds is, they call it Jet 2. And I'm like, or Jet, I think it's Jet 3.
Jet 3.
Jet 3. Yeah. And I'm like, come on, you can't do that because medium jets are about 20,000 to about 35,000 pounds, and the super mids are 35,000 pounds to like 45,000 pounds. And then you've got, you've got the 7X that fully outfitted, scoped out, weighs in at something like 50,000 pounds. So does that count as it's, so what I go by when I classify the jets in the calculator, weight class plays into it, but it also plays into where they fall in the charter regime. How are they marketed? And the 7X is the example I use. The 7X would typically be not classified would be classified as in the large. Pardon me, the 7X is like 70,000. I'm sorry, but you would typically put that in a large jet, not a long range jet range. But I move it to the long range jet range because the 7X isn't competing against G450s. It's competing against or Challenger 604s. It's competing against G550s, G600s. It's in that range. So what I'm trying to say is, yes, there are jets that straddle it. I break out medium from super midsize in the calculator because they're distinctly different classes in the way the jets are marketed and the way they're paid. And then I also have a class of jet called premium large. You've got large jets, but then you've got premium large jets, and the premium large jets are the jets that are the sexier jets. Like G500 is a premium large jet because the G500 guy or gal is going to say, well, I could fly the larger jet. I've got the same type rating. I could go do that. So I need to pay them probably a little more if I'm going to hang on to them. And what I'll tell you is when the Falcon 6X debuts, that's where it'll go as well, because it's going to be a premium. It's going to be in a class all of its own for a while. And that's going to be, it's going to be, requiring a different degree of compensation for sure.
Yeah. And that's what makes your product so great is you can get down there, break out the details. You can select what city, what market you're in. And so there's that added layer of adjustability that I think pilots will appreciate, but also, HR and owners will appreciate too, because they can look at it and be like, look, we're drilling in, as good as we can. Mm-hmm. And so we appreciate this. We appreciate that product. Dr. Broyhill, we will get you out of here on this. If folks want to get more information, obviously we'll have the link to the AirComp Calculator, your website, your LinkedIn in the show notes. But you're also going to be making a few in-person appearances at some of our trade shows coming up. Can you mention where folks can see you?
Yeah, if you're watching this program and you're a scheduler or dispatcher, or you like to go to SDC, I'll be at SDC in Fort Worth, scheduler and dispatchers. What I'm told is that of all the different events the NBAA does, that's the most fun. I will be experiencing that personally. So I'm going to be. Okay. That's the not this week, but next week. Then I'll be at IOC in Orlando the last week of this month. I will be at the maintenance conference at the end of April, beginning of May. That's in Portland, Oregon. And I'll be at the NBAA Regional in White Plains in June. So if you're in any of those places, you want to come by, say hello.
Do you do salary surveys for directors of maintenance and maintenance professionals? Okay.
I have four different maintenance positions I track: director of maintenance, maintenance supervisor, maintenance tech, and then line service technician.
Flight attendants?
I've got 4 of them I track. Say again?
Flight attendants?
Yep, senior flight attendant and flight attendant. You bet.
What else is left besides all the pilots, all the maintenance, and all the flight attendants?
So you got
Zamboni driver for the hangar.
Yeah, I've got dispatchers. I've got scheduler, and then I've got it's called flight coordinator scheduler, and then flight coordinator office manager. So I've got 2 of them as well.
He's got the market covered, Max.
Yeah, everybody is typically in a flight department.
You should develop a position soon as a pilot executive assistant, because that's the next phase in this evolution. Is all the pilots are going to be demanding assistants now.
I'll tell you what I wish I had the data for, because I really value the position. There's more and more flight operations are hiring people to be business analysts. You know, that just all they do is analyze the budget in flight ops. I had one of those when I was director of aviation long ago. Those people are invaluable if you've got a budget to manage. Invaluable.
That would be a great thing,
but there's not enough
too.
of them to be statistically significant yet.
That would be such a great thing, too, to have somebody that did that full time, because it could also quantify the benefit that the flight department provides to the parent company. That would be very good for your longevity should hard economic times fall upon us. So,
yep, absolutely true. Absolutely true.
All right, cool. Well, thanks, Dr. Broyhill. We always appreciate your insight, bridging the gap between us pilots and HR and everybody else that decides what we get paid. So thank you for doing that.
Yep, always happy to be of service, and happy to help out anybody who needs it.
All right, Dr. Broyhill, aircompcalculator.com is the website. Go see him at any of the NBAA events coming up. Thank you for the service you provide to our industry, and we'll look forward to checking in with you again soon.
That sounds great. Great talking to you guys, as always.
Max, I think it's funny because we see sort of this standstill in the airlines right now. And, you know, you and I have talked many times, you know, that the airlines kind of drive everything. But we're in this weird situation where there's still a shortage of business aviation personnel, but now there's a little backlog at the airlines. So it's kind of a weird, stagflation is the word that comes to mind. I don't know.
It's just it's always in transition, because we're in a business that ebbs and flows, right?
Yeah.
I don't think it ever stays in a straight line very long, and we're just in the midst of one of the many curves in the line graph. So, it's interesting because pilot pay is something that pilots love to talk about, and they hate to talk about, depending on who the audience is.
Exactly.
They love to talk about it amongst themselves, and they hate to talk about it when you're negotiating pay with your superior or whatever. And so the thing that I love about Dr. Broyhill's data is not only, it's accurate and all that stuff that we've already said, but it just makes the conversation so much easier, because there's not a lot of negotiating about what the numbers are. The numbers are there. You just negotiate on where you want to fall in the percentile. And I think that's a much better position to be negotiating from, rather than trying to beat someone over the head for a dollar amount. Say, look, here's where the data is. This is the most accurate data available. And, and I think if you put it in a percentile context, which you're able to do with that data, it makes it much easier for everybody, not just pilot side.
Yeah. Where do we want to live? Let's pick up a spot and let's own it. And okay, we don't fly that much. We have everything scheduled way out in advance. We have contract, all these things. Maybe we have a higher quality of life, so the percentile is going to be different than you're on call 24/7, and that's that graph basically can help you to kind of locate where you need to be.
Yep. So once again, thank you to Dr. Broyhill for being the only one in the business that's putting this together, and we'll check in with him again in the future, right?
That's right. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day, Max, to join us for this intro and outro.
Listen, I appreciate you making the accommodation.
Well, we'll be back next week during this busy summer month. But until then, remember, flexibility is the key to recording podcasts.
Once in a while on your way to work.
I mean, a hands-free car setup is, yeah, exactly.
All the things.
Needed.
The statements made in this show are our own opinions and do not reflect, nor were they under any direction from any of our employers.